Hello, and welcome back to I'll Have What She's Having, the podcast where your sex life and sense of absolute aliveness is our number one concern. I am so excited to share this conversation with you all. It's about sex, obviously, intimacy, masculinity, healing, and even what it means to feel safe in your own body. Today's guest is Bear Phillips, and he didn't just study this work, he lived an entire life before stepping into it. 30 years as an architect, building structures, working in a more controlled working space, living what most people would call a stable life, and then everything changed. So after decades of doing his own deep healing work, including navigating childhood sexual trauma, Bear had a moment that completely redirected his path. And what he stepped into is honestly some of the most nuanced, embodied intimacy work I've ever come across. We talk about what it actually means to feel safe in someone's arms, why so many people, especially women, have never experienced that with men, how patriarchy disconnects men from their emotional and sexual bodies, and how we can start to heal that connection. And how that all shows up in the bedroom, where we end up thinking sex instead of feeling it. So we go deep into touch therapy and nervous system regulation, into conscious kink and daddy dynamics, and why it's really not what you think it is. We get into power and consent and how they can become tools for healing. And something I think every single person needs to hear is how to actually repair after conflict. Right? Because intimacy isn't just about when you're connecting and things are feeling good. It's about what happens after rupture, right? None of us were ever taught how to create a culture of repair. None of us were ever taught how to repair well. And that's such an essential skill that allows us to go deeper because we trust that the other person can meet us in that repair. We can be even more intimate with our partners this way. And so, whether you're exploring your sexuality, navigating relationships, new or old, or just trying to feel more at home in your body, this episode is going to give you a completely different lens to explore that from. So, before we get into it, just a few quick announcements. So, firstly, my dears, let me tell you about my next retreat. We just had about a month ago a fabulous 3-day retreat here in BC, Canada, in early May that literally changed some lives, and I am speaking directly from those testimonials. It awakened sexuality, exponentially increased body confidence, and initiated a group of wild women. And the next one's an entire week in Mexico next February. It's called Wild Women Unleashed, and it will be launching soon. So before then, you could go grab your early bird ticket price by getting yourself on the wait list. You can check out my website where all those details are. It's an initiation into your next self, the version of you who's ready to be wild and sexually free, who's ready to feel fully confident in your body, who's in tune with the greater rhythms of your womanhood and nature itself. We will be at this luxurious retreat space surrounded by thick jungle with an intimate group of sisters, learning the essential pleasure skills that you were never taught. I am unbelievably excited for this experience, and if you think it's for you, apply now using the link in the show notes. So next, if you don't know, I offer one-on-one sex coaching, and it's deeply tailored and customized to you and what you need. And the first step to working with me is a free 15-minute consultation call where we chat about what's going on for you in sex and relationships. You get to feel heard and understood. You get to feel seen, and that's it. 15 minutes might change your life, and you might say, that's not for me. But if it is for you, the unique process brings you into your most embodied, alive life. So you can book your first call using a link in the show notes as well. And lastly, if you want to try out some of my best sex techniques, your best way is through my free offer called the Pleasure Portal. It's a free 15-minute guided pleasure breathwork where you get to come alive in your sexuality and practice some of the stuff that you already know how to do. You just might not have realized are actually the keys to having more amazing sex. So check that out also in the show notes. And oh my goodness, welcome to this week's episode. I'm so excited for you to listen. Hello, welcome, Bear. How are you doing today?
Good, thank you. Good. So excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
So excited to have you here. I've been excited to have this conversation for quite a while now. And so yeah, let's start with okay, so you were an architect for 30 years, right? And then you completely changed paths, not too different from me who was an engineer for slightly less time into intimacy work and sex work. So what happened?
Wow. Wait, how long do we have? This is just that one question could take a while. Let me see
Take
the
as long as you
most
need.
thank you. The most succinct way of putting it is yeah, I was an architect for 30 years, just kind of secure in that kind of work environment, professional environment, regular income coming in. But I was kind of living, I wasn't that I was living a double life at all, but there was a different side that I was developing over that time. So I'm a survivor of CSA, childhood sexual abuse from a young age. And so I've been involved in different forms of therapy, one-to-one therapy, group therapy, personal development workshops, anything and everything for more than half my life. And there was just a sense of the the who I was inside moving out of alignment with what I was doing externally in my work. And it's quite interesting. Architecture is all about control. It's all about controlling the drawing, controlling the flow of information, controlling the people that are building the building. It's so much about control. And I was really increasingly feeling uncomfortable about that. And then in 2018, I think it was, I had quite an unexpected encounter with psychedelics, my first time exploring psychedelics, with someone who was saying to me, oh, it'll be just a really gentle, heart opening experience. And I had 6 hours of just the most extraordinary downloads, download after download after down. Because I'd gone into it with this question of what is my purpose? And was thinking at the time, what a ridiculous question to ask, as though an encounter with psychedelics is going to answer a question like that. But if I wasn't already lying down, the force of it just hit me so directly in my body. Um, and it was all to do with, I think a lot of people have this experience of like taking a step back from life during the psychedelic experience and like connecting all of the dots and recognizing, I've spent half my life healing from sexual trauma, and that my my purpose is to support other people on their healing journeys. And that's where it started. It was really interesting that it reduced to a bit of a mantra over the 6 hours of "I am sacred whore, I am sacred whore," and that was just the thing that kept coming back to the idea of being able to, which had been my experience, to find my way back through sexuality and pleasure as a way of reclaiming my wholeness, reclaiming who I am, reclaiming desire, reclaiming wants and needs, learning how to ask for all of that stuff. So yeah, that was the really big turning point. Yeah, it was wild. I even remember seeing the website. I mean, the detail in these 6 hours, like what I should be doing to look after myself, professional boundaries I would need to have in place. Really mind blowing, properly transformational as an experience.
Yeah, wow. That's intense, but also like what an incredible experience to have. And yeah, just to, I mean, the answer isn't always go do psychedelics to find your life's purpose, but like it
Yeah,
really doesn't hurt,
it,
honestly.
yeah, that thing of the perspective, like being able to see things differently without the same like emotional involvement or baggage. And yeah, of course, since 2018, it's been like an ongoing journey of discovery of how I offer what it is that will support people. And so most currently, I refer to myself as an intimacy coach and touch therapist. So I work with individuals, couples, around alternative sexualities, alternative relationship styles. Um, I also still offer body work and touch-based work, which can move towards sexuality and pleasure, but begins with much more of a focus on just supporting people to feel safe in their bodies, um, around embodied consent, learning to really understand what a genuine whole body yes feels like, and being able to plug into that. And in similar ways, learn how to ask for wants and needs and desires and be good about boundaries,
Yeah.
all of that good stuff.
I mean, absolutely. That's all such juicy work. And I'm curious how you really see the touch aspect come into that. Because I think we see a lot of like intimacy work, we see a lot of like connection work, a lot of therapy, but like what does touch therapy look like?
Oh, thank you. I think a really big piece of it is around nervous system regulation and co-regulation. Um, I have in the past worked with clients on a 24-hour basis, so like real deep dive immersives where we could explore, explore pleasure, explore touch, coming in and out over a period of time. But often there's this extraordinary experience of being able to hold someone body to body, skin to skin, like at the next level of co-regulation, from where to explore really difficult, challenging issues that people might be experiencing in their lives. It's like there's this really interesting thing that Gabor Mate sometimes refers to, that can I get this right? That healing from trauma can only begin once the conditions for safety are met. And there's a second phrase that he often uses, which is about a definition of safety. And this, I love this phrase. It lands with me over and over again. And I think it's a variation on something Viktor Frankl might have said, but that safety is not the absence of threat. Safety is the presence of connection. So it's combining touch with a sense of connection and safety, from where we can start to look at the really difficult, challenging things that have held us back in life, our adaptive behaviors, our coping mechanisms. All of these things can then be explored from that place of embodied safety and connection.
Yeah, I love that. I really love the mention of safety as something because the word safety, it implies that like something is being given to us almost like, okay, you are safe. You're being given this. But instead, it's so much more around like it's safer, it's being safer
Yes.
or safest, like the safest that we could be. But safety, pure like unaffected safety doesn't exist. And that's, I feel like this word becoming more and more prevalent is great, but it doesn't speak to that nuance that like safety is something you have to create, you have to actively be a participant in. And it's not about being safe, it's about being safer, which means everybody's just aware of what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And I guess just adding into that, the relational aspect, that safety sense of feeling safer occurs when we're in connection with someone else. And we kind of know at a kind of energetic level where someone is, what someone's feeling. Kind of not necessarily what they're thinking, but it's like we're feeling comfortable in their presence. There's an emotional attunement.
mhm. Yeah, and I think the aspect of touch and that beautiful dynamic you're explaining of like sinking deeply in with someone over a period of time where you really get to experience the embodied touch, embodied safety is so important. And I think that that really makes me think of so as a man and as someone offering this from a male oriented space, where do you see, because I know, like, you've spoken about the patriarchy as being a form of disconnection. So let's talk about, like, the masculinity aspect of that and, like, how that enters into it. Like, how important is it for a woman, for example, to be, like, safe in a man's arms, and how can that revolutionize their entire sexual experience?
Yes. Wow. Yeah. Patriarchy is a form of disconnection. It's something I've been thinking a lot about. Um, it was really when there was this period where I had primarily women making bookings for, on the surface, sexual services, and then arriving in my studio and spending like 3 hours in my arms crying and saying I didn't know it was possible to feel safe in a man's arms. And there was something really powerful about that, that it was actually not about the sex, it was about the intimacy that came from a sense of feeling safer. But also then having clients say to me, you're helping me heal from the wounds inflicted by the men in my life. And that was like a really important wake up call, that I also have a responsibility to work with men, continue to heal my own wounds, absolutely hands up, like recognizing the ways in which my socialization has hurt me as a man. And what I've come to understand is, yeah, there's some really interesting research which looks at how parents will speak to the unborn child while it's still in utero and use different language if they know it's a girl or a boy. And even once we're born, there's research that looks at how people will use more emotional language with girls, and I'm aware I'm speaking very binary terms, but less emotional language with boys. It's like really interesting how deep it goes and how early the socialization begins. There's also this piece around the way that patriarchy is a way of using shame uh, against boys to effectively make us cut ourselves off from our emotional bodies. That any sensitivity needs to be cut out. So all of the shaming around boys don't cry, man up, all of the terms that are used are forms of shame and shaming that at the youngest age teach us that there's something that's not okay about being who we are, and that we have to cut parts of ourselves off. And so I have this sense of the what it is to be a human being that involves this extraordinary spectrum of emotion and feeling, and maybe most importantly empathy. And that in our socialization, how that is so reduced to a really thin sliver of what's okay as a man in the world. And so a lot of the work that I've had to do on myself, and I have to continue doing on myself, is recognizing how debilitating that shame was for me as a young boy, and learning how to reclaim my full emotional body, how to be able to hold like exquisite sensitivity and gentleness, as well as raw and power and a sense of entitlement in a good way. Like, I am entitled to exist in the world as myself. I don't need to conform to any standards that anyone else has imposed on me. I have the joy of the uniqueness of who we are as human beings. That's what I want to get back to. And in terms, and I'll wrap this up. It's my nerdy subject. I love talking about this. But this idea of masculinities in the plural, that certainly the journey I went through, growing up thinking of men as perpetrators because that was my experience, and then having this like real confusion in my teenage years. But if I'm a man, what does that make me? What does that say about me? The idea of being able to, for every man, to reclaim what masculinity means for them. So that's what I've had to do, figure out what it looks like for me, what feels true for me, and that there can be as many forms of masculinity as there are men in the world. Am I even answering the question you asked? I'm not sure.
You know what? I don't even know anymore and I don't care. I'm just listening being like, "This is amazing." I don't know. And you're right though. Like the amount of men these days that reach adulthood and still don't understand what it means to be a man or what masculinity means to them, or they've never even been asked or prompted to think of that answer. And it's incredible because yeah, I've worked with clients where it's like, "Well, what does masculinity mean to you?" And they're using this, like, really almost aggressive language or self-debilitating language or just assumptions that don't allow them to be fully expressed, that don't allow them space to grow, space to be themselves. And this the same is for femininity, right? Like, we have such large stereotypes and expectations around these roles, around these these archetypes in the world that we don't allow ourselves to express fully in them. And so I'm curious, what does masculinity mean to you then?
Hmm. Yeah, I think for me it is that piece that I really enjoy about that being able to hold both ends of that spectrum of sensitivity, gentleness, presence, awareness, emotional attunement, but also the ability and it was one of the things that I discovered through conscious kink, the ability to stand in my power, my personal power. And power is a whole interesting topic, but to know that I can defend myself, to know that I can look after myself and those that I love, that I've had that really visceral embodied experience of power, and I'm really meaning power in a positive sense, as filling me up, as feeling whole and complete. And that feels like a really important piece for me, being able to hold both of those polarities.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. And I love that offering, like, just this is what it means to me, this is what it means to me. Like, the more that men and even women, everybody gets to hear what these terms mean to everybody individually, I think that offers us all just more options, right? Who do we wanna be? How do we wanna show up?
Yeah,
So thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
cute.
And and so I wanna talk too about, like, the really fascinating point you brought up that, like, people are talked to in different ways. Like, there's this binary way of speaking that, "Oh, even in utero, we're gonna start speaking to you differently. We're gonna start giving you different toys. We're gonna start, you know, nurturing the emotions of some people and not others." And so, like, a lot of men are socialized not to feel them, not to express emotions. And so, how do you see that showing up in their sex lives?
I think there's a really interesting piece in the work that I've been doing around this, recognizing that if there is an emotion that's trapped in the body, it's very difficult to get to a place of surrender, and by that I mean surrender to pleasure, not in a surrender to power way. So often when I've worked with people, when I've worked primarily with women, if there's an emotion that needs expressing, if there's any resentment or anger or frustration just at the day or whatever it might be, the ability to connect with that feeling and then to allow that emotion to complete. I'm thinking of like a bell curve jar where, an emotion will arrive and it'll peak. And if we allow it to flow through us, it will complete itself. It'll move through us. But when we don't know how to allow that, when we don't know how to connect with it, especially through our socialization, we learn to disconnect from our bodies and learn to not hear all of the messages that the body is sending the brain. There ends up being a blockage of some kind. So we end up thinking sex rather than feeling sex. We end up thinking intimacy rather than feeling intimacy. And thinking our way through intimacy is not the best way to really land in that place of presence with each other. because we're always like thinking, if we're in our head, we're either full of regret for the past or thinking about the future. It's only when we can connect with the body that we can come into genuine moment by moment presence. And that's where intimacy and sexuality and pleasure can go to the next level. So I think men have a lot of that. We have big challenges around learning to feel again. I it's one of those classic things that patriarchy does, that we, through our socialization, we end up cutting ourselves off from our bodies. So we don't hear the messages. And in some of the polyvagal research, I think it's something like an 80-20 ratio of the two-way flow of information between the body and the brain, except the 80% is going this way. It's going from the body to the brain. So it blows my mind that we've learned, we've been socialized out of recognizing that information. It's called interoception, the ability to read the signals the body is sending. But then, of course, patriarchy prioritizes the rational mind and the logical mind and makes everything else like less than and not as good as, because it's something we've
Mhm.
lost and don't actually want to face the pain of that loss.
Yes, and face the pain of the sensations in our bodies on a moment by moment basis,
Yeah.
and being present with those emotions is actually really, really hard. Like, it's a skill that you have to learn and you have to step back into, and yeah, you're right, the fact that we've lost a lot of that ability is absolutely terrifying. And yes, I try to explain this concept all the time in my work, right? Of like, we're getting back into the body and we need to be able to interpret the signals that our body is telling us, right? It's there's a highway of information going from your heart to your brain, and there's a tiny little country road going back down. And it's difficult to explain to people who have never been introduced to that and never been introduced to the somatic experience of your body. But, so I wanna briefly touch on with, like, talking a lot about, like, patriarchy, like, there's the opposite, like the feminist movements, and I love the title of your upcoming book, "Feminism Will Make a Man Out of You." I love that so much, so I just wanted to ask, like, what does that mean to you?
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I know you were talking earlier about all of the social strictures that demand that women be a certain way, but there's an and in that, which is that I think where feminism for women has been so successful is broadening out what a woman can be, who a woman, what. It's like there's a sense of anything is possible these days, um, which is still very much at odds with the way patriarchy functions, and that we live as men in the world, where there are still these really extraordinary societal pressures that men should be breadwinners, that there are certain providers, that to be a man should look a certain way. Like that's really what feminism was about for women, was breaking that and saying you can be anything you want to. And I think that's what I was wanting to capture in the book. It's already been a couple 3 years in the writing of it. But this sense of like, again, coming back to a sense of what makes each of us unique and what are the unique gifts that we can bring, which are separate from all of the messages that we've received since childhood of how we should be. Like, I think there's a whole process for a lot of men around, I don't know, maybe this isn't the right term, but I'm thinking of unmasking. So I've been unmasking from my social conditioning, but also acknowledging autism and ADHD in my makeup. And I get curious about that as well. It's like I wonder how many men struggle with that unknowingly. The kinds of lives that we're pushed towards and pushed into are at odds with the way we might actually want to be in the world, the way we might want to function, a kind of a pace of life, different ways of thinking and processing. It's kind of quite an extraordinary moment of self-realization to begin to let some of those cultural messages go about how we should be.
Yeah, I really love that perspective on feminism. That it really like, cause you're right, we have been told I've grown up in this beautiful new environment where I've been told that I can be anything I wanna be, and that, those rules don't apply, and there's also like a sexual revolution that comes along with that in the feminine space that hasn't yet reached the masculine space. There still feels like there's more rules and structure and, like, expectations almost on the masculine space, so I'm curious to see how this all evolves and how this all shakes out in the next couple decades because I'm sure things will change. They have to, right? When one like side of the scale kind of tips, the other side has to kind of balance out somehow. So it's got to happen.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and so the I want to talk about like creating cultures of repair because there's that in that balance comes this kind of idea of repair. There's repair inside. There's repair, interconnectively, interrelationally. And so what does that mean to repair the feminine aspect, the masculine aspect, the interior aspect, the relational aspect, and even as far as the sexual relational aspect. I know that's a lot of different dimensions, but like, do they all relate together? And how can we think of creating repair?
Yeah. Yeah. That's such a great question. I think irrespective of the many dimensions that you mention, I think a lot of it comes back to that thing we were talking about earlier that if we're holding on to certain emotions, it's really difficult to be able to shift out of that to a place of curiosity. There's a wonderful book from either the people that set up the Harvard negotiation project called Difficult Conversations, how to discuss the things that matter most. It's a wonderful book. They they talk there's so many wonderful concepts in there. A big one is this piece around how to shift from a blame culture where we're blaming each other in a conflict and becoming increasingly divided and entrenched in our positions. How to shift from blame to contribution, which involves curiosity. What was my part in this rupture? How are you feeling? Like that curiosity that actually brings us closer together and brings us into connection. But if there is feeling present, if there's anger, if there's resentment, if there's frustration, it's very difficult to shift into that place of curiosity. And I think there's a big piece here. Again, it comes back to gender socialization, but there's a big piece for men especially to learn how to hold emotions, not just for ourselves, but how to hold emotions for other people. We're taught from such an early age to problem solve, to jump to fix things, which bypasses how important feelings are and how important the expression of feelings are as part of the process of reconnecting with each other. Because there's such vulnerability in that. There's extraordinary generosity to be able to say to someone, I'm angry with you. It's like really revealing something about ourselves and trusting the other person can hold it and not minimize it or dismiss it. And I think there's so much here about can we hold each other in the feelings, in the difficult feelings that come up? Can we hold space for those feelings to pass and move through without needing to fix in any way? And once we're able to then reconnect with each other, then a genuinely productive conversation can begin based on curiosity and understanding. What story am I carrying about this conflict? What story are you carrying? What's your perspective? What are the things you can see that I can't see? That curiosity then really can bring us closer together. And that's in a way the place to aim towards in any rupture and repair is the recognition that if we can stay with it, there can be more intimacy after the fact than there was before. And I think that can be incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I think that's such a key point. And I've experienced that myself where there was a rupture in one of my past relationships, a quite large one of trust and of boundaries and of respect. And like I'd never had to go through this before. I didn't know how to even start. And so I just kind of started writing and I found different pieces that I needed from my partner, like different things that I needed to offer myself, and yeah, it kind of became this like living document of like these are the steps we're going to take to repair the relationship. And it ended up being quite the wonderful exercise because yeah, after the fact we actually became closer. We actually like there was so much more trust, there was so much more deepening because like we'd had these hard conversations. And so like I'm never worried if somebody's in a relationship and they're like, "Oh yeah, we've gone through conflict and we've repaired and we're here now." Or like even the same as like I find that happens in sexuality too, that people reach a certain age in their life and then they have a rupture with themselves, even. And then they don't know how to repair that rupture with themselves because they've always just, sex has just happened. There's never been a conflict in their own experience. And so being able to repair that conflict in your interrelational relationship, in your, right? Like if you haven't tried to repair it, you don't know that you can. You don't have that like bounce back. So,
Mm.
yeah, I think that's such a beautiful point of yeah, there's more trust, there's more intimacy. There's yeah, like that's when you're able to get more intimate. And so how can people well, I guess like so this culture of repair. I've heard you speak about like how you are working to create it. I'm curious what steps are you taking in your life and in your work to help create those?
Thank you. Well, a few years ago now, it's about 3 years ago, I started working on something called Safer S Plus Spaces, which is a kind of a by the community for the community, where I've been so blessed to be working with some extraordinary human beings that are in the field of, in the sex positive community, practitioners, facilitators, where we've created a community. We have our own WhatsApp community chat, um, where the underlying theme is normalizing difficult conversations, which is about how can we begin to have these conversations sooner rather than experience a hurt or experience, say, a consent incident or accident and hold on to that and withdraw ourselves and hold on to that and allow those difficult feelings to grow. How can we begin to learn how to approach each other sooner, to say the things that we need to say? How can we as a community support each other around accountability and accountability processes? How can we just normalize this idea that as the unique human beings we are, we all have our own wants, needs, and desires. So it's simply a given that at some point our wants and needs will rub up against someone else's. The conflict of some kind is unavoidable. It's what happens next that matters most. How do we come back into connection with each other? And that's a little bit where we've been putting together resources. There's a structure for how to have a rant for rupture and repair. I don't know if that's a term that you're having a rant. It's quite a useful one around you know uh,
Yeah. I mean, if it means the same thing to me as it does to you, just like spitting all your emotions out, then yeah.
yeah, but I'm using it as a structure. So A being for so A hyphen rant. A, are you available? R for receiving and reflecting, like really being able to hear someone and using non-violent communication to let someone know that they have been heard. A for acknowledge and apologize, like really acknowledge that the hurt that someone's feeling, the pain that they're feeling. And there's a really important piece in them, which is acknowledging that harm and hurt can occur despite our best intentions. That because a rupture has occurred, because there's been some impact, that it simply is. That doesn't make us, as the person that might have been the cause of that, bad or wrong. It just simply is. Again, it's like unavoidable. So can we just acknowledge that and to feel empathy for the other person? We don't have to rescue them, but to simply acknowledge that something happened. N is for needs. What needs might we have? And T for trust and transformation, which I think is a really important one around what is it that I might commit to do to avoid this rupture happening again in the future? What are the learnings that might be possible here? So these are the kinds of tools that we've been looking at developing to support people around having difficult conversations. And I'm really happy to include how to have a rant in the resources with this podcast.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you. That's exactly the kind of resources that and structures that I think a lot of people who listen to this type of podcast really want. They're like, "Oh, yeah, give me the frameworks that I can reference that can help me have good conversations." Like anybody who loves imago dialogue is like, "Oh, yes, give me
Mhm.
this." Absolutely. I'm such a relationship nerd, so yes, let's include that. Thank you so much for creating those kinds of structures and for consciously, like, talking to others about that. That's really incredible.
Well, there's nothing new in there, but just trying to find, as you say, structures or systems that support us to be able to implement some of this stuff. That's what feels really important.
Absolutely. I agree. And so I'd love to, like, switch lanes for a second here too. Like, I think we mentioned conscious kink at some point early on, but
Mhm.
I wanna steer directly into the skid and talk about conscious kink.
Mhm.
And where that enters into a culture of repair and healing sexuality. And yeah, like I think a lot of people have a very specific idea as to what it means. I know I did before I learned more about it. And so, how is it different than people imagine? And what does it mean to you?
Thank you. Mm, what does it mean to me? I think just as a preamble to answering that, it's maybe helpful for my in my experience. I went through many years of talk-based therapy, and something then shifted when I discovered dance movement embodiment. It was like suddenly things shifted in terms of my healing journey to a whole other level the moment the body was involved. But then there was a similar experience when I discovered conscious kink. It was like, again, another like exponential movement in terms of my inner healing work. And what I came to understand that a lot of traditional kink play can be about the way things look, can be about technique, can be about the tools, can be about the toys. What I came to understand from my very first experience with conscious kink was the intentionality that was present and the presence that was present. Like this piece around, I think of presence and emotional attunement as being somewhat interchangeable. That in conscious kink, because of the activities involved, it demands our absolute attention. And something extraordinary happens when we can be with each other at such a level of awareness, like breath by breath connection. So for me, conscious kink is about the intention that we bring when we play in a certain way. But also then as a result of that, the intensity of it. Like I've found that things that on the outside might look pretty vanilla. Actually, if the intensity is there and the focus is there, it's like you can go on some really wild rides. And just to add also around the why it was so important to me was both around the understanding of power and consent. So, I've been part of the Kink community for the last 15, 16 years. And it was quite an extraordinary moment to understand that, oh, here's a whole community of people that can talk about consent, that have an understanding of power and power dynamics, that it's so carefully and clearly negotiated. No, that was in a way my deepest wounding as a child was that there was no recognition of the power dynamics at play. And so here as an adult in a conscious kink environment, I was able to reclaim parts of myself by being able to be the one that had the ultimate say. Does something proceed? Does something stop? Does something feel good? Does something not feel good? Like being able to be the one in charge to reclaim my autonomy and sovereignty as a sexual being. That's what that's that combined with presence, that combined with playing with people that could really be with me in that moment to moment awareness was kind of almost like an experience of love with a capital L, of like something bigger than me, of a kind of almost divine experience or experience of divinity.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally understand that. But I also am aware that, like, it is an embodied experience. Like, you can't truly know it. Like, you can hear us, you can understand it, but, like, you really do have to experience it for yourself to truly understand what you're speaking to, which, like, I absolutely agree. I've just tasted it a few times, and yes, there's a level of presence, there's a level of awareness, there's that love, there's that connection, and absolutely the power you feel, even if you're quote unquote the submissive, you have full power to say yes or no, and you know that the other person is so present with you, and obviously there's so much trust that you've developed to be able to give them that power symbolically in this moment, yet you also hold a whole bunch because if you say no, everything stops. And that power alone, knowing beyond a doubt that you say no and everything stops and that your choices mean so much, like that heals. That absolutely heals on a deep level that like you almost can't explain because you can't talk about it. Like conscious kink truly is a form of deep inner therapy that is so impossible to understand without actually experiencing it. And so, like, I think a lot of people have this understanding that kink is maybe like more dark or more dangerous. There's stereotypes around leather and whips
Uh-huh.
and dark dungeons and stuff. And and yet like it really is about like caring. And so I'm curious with what you know about conscious kink and power dynamics, like what does it mean to be dominant? Because I've heard it described as being like so caring. Like how would you describe it? How do you embody it?
Oh.
What lessons have you learned from it?
Yeah. So I identify as a daddy. So there's kink subcultures around, and it's really important just to kind of before going any further to really clearly underline this point that daddy, or sometimes it's referred to as big little dynamics, is absolutely about consenting adults agreeing to engage in a certain kind of role play. That's all we're talking about here. Consenting adults playing at different, maybe playing with different ages, but often connecting with different ages within ourselves. But as a daddy, that's my way of connecting with what feels like being a dominant in a lot of the play that I engage with. And it is in a way a more extreme version of what you're describing. It is about nurturance and care. It is about being able to hold someone completely. It's kind of interesting. It links back to some of our earlier conversations around it can be sexy, it can be playing with the toys and the tools of kink, but often it can simply be about holding someone in their emotions, allowing someone to completely surrender into that sense of safety as far as that's possible to create, to recognize that they can allow themselves to drop into a different experience where they will be cared and cared for. And that can very much look like loving, kind gentleness. It can also look like being strict with someone, being disciplinarian with someone. If that is for their good, it still comes from the place of care, of wanting the best for the other person. And so that's, yeah, I don't know if that conveys how it is for me, but yeah, nurturance and care are the terms that I often come back to around
Mhm.
being dominant, but also, let me just feel into this, also being able to own my wants and desires in that as well. So, yeah, being able to hold those with awareness, and to be able to own them, to be really clear about being able to communicate my wants and desires when it's appropriate, or to hold them and contain them when it's not appropriate for whatever
Mhm.
the play is that I'm engaging in.
Yeah. And so the transformational aspect, the conscious kink piece of, because you can also just do it to play, right? Like I love the way of like we talk about sex and all these transformational like frameworks, and then there's also, this is adult play. This is another form of playing.
Yeah.
So is kink dynamics, so is power dynamics. It's fun to play with like the dynamics that already exist in the room, right? The idea that like somebody has positional power, somebody has like all kinds of power exist all the time in every room. And sometimes you're just playing with them and seeing what it would feel like to try certain pieces on, like a piece of clothing. Like, I'm going to try on this identity today.
Yeah.
Um, but when it comes to transformational kink and conscious kink in this way, like I'm curious how you go about deciding what angles to take, and how do you figure out like what would be the most transformational thing to enter into? Like if somebody had never done this before, or if somebody was just starting and thinking like, I don't even know where to start, but I know that this could help me. How do people figure out where to begin?
Well, the single most important piece is that it should be led by the person that's seeking that transformation or that healing. I think even in the work that I do as a coach and a therapist, something I've come to learn to really be on my guard against is coming with an agenda, of coming with a sense of, I know what it is you need to heal this or to transform that. Like it comes back to this idea of inner consent, like a genuine, at a value level, belief that each of us, as the living organisms that we are, have an inner movement to become the most whole versions of ourselves. I'm thinking of, I don't know, seedlings of trees that continue to grow and evolve to become the most tree that they can. It's like whatever comes, whatever uh, trials or tribulations we encounter in life, there's still an inner movement towards healing that. So I'm always with this thing of whoever client I might be working with or whoever I might be playing with in a kink context, trusting them, trusting that at some level, even if it's at a subconscious or unconscious level, they know what it is that they need for their healing. And to hold that, to maybe be open to offering alternatives for consideration, but not in any way pushing towards a particular outcome, of being able to play, as you were describing. Play is such an important piece, which again is knocked out of us very early in childhood, but play as a intentional form of discovery, and to be able to play without enormous pressure on outcome, let's try this thing and see if we like it. Maybe we'll like it, maybe we won't. Maybe there'll be opportunity to do something different with it, or maybe we'll know very quickly, no, this isn't working for me. But it does. I don't know why it's reminding me of this idea of sexual empathy, which was when I was first exploring kink. There were so many things that I was like, no, that's really not for me. I'm so not interested in whatever it might be. But the moment I found myself playing with someone that was turned on by one of these things, their turn on connected with my turn on connected with theirs. And suddenly it's like, oh, I think I get it now. Which was kind of, comes back to the idea of emotional attunement and really being with someone and feeling what they're feeling and being able to understand why different activities might have different impacts or a different set of experiences attached to them.
Yeah, the emotional attunement is really quite something special. I've recently been playing with someone who like we're very, very emotionally attuned to the point where like, yeah, their excitement breeds my excitement. We can really jump off of each other's sexual energy and just really escalate. But the opposite is also true, right? We're so attuned that little changes in each other's like experience impacts ours, and we can very quickly go into a downward spiral as well. And so yeah, right. It's interesting that that emotional attunement, and so we're still obviously playing with that, and I absolutely love the post sex conversation or the post play conversation where you go, okay, so what worked, what didn't work. Are we ready to get feedback or do we just want to celebrate what happened? I mean, generally, that would be something that I would suggest is like, don't jump straight into feedback. Go straight to celebrating and talk about what was wonderful, hold each other closely, and maybe don't talk about what to change next time until you're, sitting with a cup of coffee the next day.
Yeah,
Um,
I love that. It-
definitely,
mm,
definitely done that one too many times.
I think there's something really important in that, going back to what we were saying earlier, or that Gabor Mate quote I mentioned around safety being not the absence of threat, but the presence of connection. That even if we find ourselves in some kind of downward emotional experience, if we can share that with each other, if we can be in that with each other, we're still in connection. And that's where the beauty of this kind of play is recognizing that we can together experience both the ecstatic highs and joys as well as the difficult stuff and the dark stuff. But we don't can we learn to not abandon each other in those moments, but really stay with, oh yeah, that was really hard, wasn't it? And to be with each other in that. It still takes us to connection.
Yes, I love this new definition of safety. Definitely gonna put that through the testing mill many, many times. Yeah. Oh, I love hearing different people's definition for things because it's always slightly different, and those little tweaks just add so much richness to the experience. Yeah. And so, in all of what you've learned about your own sexuality, in your work with others, like professional experiences, personal experiences, what does really good sex look like to you? What does a really good sexual experience look like to you?
For me, it's practically speaking, it's slow, so slow, slowing right down. As I occasionally run workshops on radical slowness, and it's a phrase that it's not original to me. I can't even remember where I first heard it, but this idea of however slow you're going, go half as slow. Like just this piece of the more we can slow down, especially in touch, the more we can feel. And I think there's so much emphasis in so much of our sexual culture which combines speed, like let's get to it, with outcome, like how quickly can we get to having an orgasm. Maybe it's a little bit of a cliche, I don't know, but the best sex for me is the sex that just feels timeless, where it is literally the exploration of each other's bodies, the exploration of pleasure, of sensation, of that feeling being a two-way experience. So it's not that I'm doing anything to my partner. It's not that they're doing anything to me, but that the act of touch, of skin on skin contact is a mutual exploration of sensation in every given moment. So to be able to be in that place of, no, it's about the journey, not the destination. That is also where I find there's so much, I don't know if it's the right word, inspiration, I suppose. It's like we don't get bored of each other's bodies. We don't get bored of the depths of pleasure because there's always another level to explore if we can allow ourselves to go there. And then it's just,
Yeah.
yeah, transcendent.
Yeah, like, I love the idea of, and I forget who I heard this from or wherever, but that I'm sorry, we've somehow been deluded into thinking that having sexual relations with the same person year after year is going to get more boring. I'm sorry, how is that possible? You know this person so much more intimately, you have so much more history with them, you have so many more ways that you know that they like, how is that less interesting? It becomes more and more juicy and interesting, like, and our culture has just reversed that completely in our minds.
I have this sense with my long-term anchor partner that I know her body so well that it feels almost like, we joke about this, it feels like playing an instrument. It's like I know how to elicit certain experiences, sensations, but it's then, okay, I know this instrument so well. I get to improvise the most extraordinary music. And it's extraordinary the pleasure that can come from that. It's like we end up becoming virtuosic with each other's bodies in that play of pleasure and discovery.
Mhm. Oh, that's a beautiful way to put it. I definitely love that definition and that, like, that framework, and that again speaks to the depths that people can, like, people can look forward to, right? That there isn't this, like, automatic decline in what happens when you enter into deep longer term partnerships, that there's so much excitement waiting for you there. There's so much excitement and novelty and in depth and continued relationship. Like, there's excitement all around. And I think that's also, that touches into the play aspect, that, like, yes, it's serious work. There's so much, like, really important depth to it, and there's so much play. And when you couple those 2 together in sex, that's where the magic happens.
That there's something really important about coming back to that piece around vulnerability and safety, because I think we're we so often find ourselves, perhaps more so in more traditional monogamous relationships, this idea that a long-term relationship has become safe in some way. And because it's become safe, it's lost some of its sexual energy, sexual charm. And I have a, I'm not sure I completely agree. Like it might be safe at one level, but so often what happens in our relationships is that we get caught between that tension of authenticity and attachment, and that we end up protecting the relationship and protecting the dynamic over our authenticity. We stop speaking what is true for us because we don't want to put the relationship at risk. And by doing that, we become a little bit armored and a little bit defensive. So we're not actually as open to each other emotionally. We're not as vulnerable with each other as we might be. So no wonder it's like the sense of the intimacy drops away because it's not actually safe. I'm trying to think who wrote the book now. Esther Perel talks about talks about the um, but yeah, I have questions about that approach. I think it's more complicated than she makes out.
Yeah, it's kind of like It speaks to the idea of the difference between the, like, relational safety of sorry, like, the position, right? Like, I'm safe in this relationship because they're married to me, right? And so they have certain commitments, and there's that, like, position in your life versus feeling deeply safe and safer than in any other relationship just because, well, because you actually relate to each other in a very safe way, because you show each other that care and that safety every day. And it's like, love is like bread. It's baked fresh every single day.
Uh-huh.
It's that, but it's with the safety and the trust and the emotional capacity to hold each other. And that, yeah, it doesn't come from just being in a relationship that has a certain title or label. It comes from the actual lived experience every single day. And both can be true, but it's when people lean on the structure and the title that's when I find there's like this dangerous like feedback loop of being like, yes, but if they're not this to me and this is what they are to me, instead of like we are in relation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And it's interesting that circles us right back to the beginning of the podcast in a way. If I think about, as someone who is socialized as a man, holding that seed of shame that's really deeply embedded in my system, there are certain levels at which it becomes terrifying to open up to a partner. There are parts of me where there's an ongoing tendency to want to hide, to want to protect. And that's where the shame can get in the way of true vulnerability and relational authenticity. And then it's so much easier, as you're saying, to fall back into, the given structures of what a safe monogamous committed relationship looks like, losing something really vital along the way.
Wow, I'm so impressed. You've touched on all the earlier pieces of the podcast and brought it into this, just to tie us so well together here, nearing the end. And as we do start to wrap up, I'm curious: is there anything else that's popping? Anything that's really bubbling up to the surface that you feel is essential to share in this conversation?
I think just something around that we've kind of touched on or hinted at in different contexts around how important it is to recognize developmental trauma. That I remember when I first heard this, it blew my mind. We have big T, capital T trauma, which is the kind of PTSD that we see so often in TV and the movies. And then there's like little T trauma, which is maybe more of the kinds of experiences that we might have on a daily basis or moving through life, or especially anyone who's from a marginalized community might be experiencing on a daily basis, even. But then there is the trauma of what should have happened in our childhoods, but didn't. And that, as a definition of developmental trauma, really knocked me sideways. I was like, oh, the things that should have happened, but didn't. And that's to do with the ways in which, as children, we might have needed to be cared for and held, accepted. When I think about the daddy play that we were talking about earlier, something that I came across in this wonderful author, David Rico. I don't know if you've come across David Rico. He's a Buddhist psychotherapist who wrote a wonderful book called Daring to Trust, Opening Ourselves to Real Love and Intimacy. And in that, he describes what for me is the closest to a practical definition of love that I've ever come across, where he describes the 5 A's. And I can never remember all five with my ADHD brain. So I'm checking my notes here. They're attention, acceptance, appreciation, affection, and allowing. And just this piece that in any kind of relationship, if we can allow these 5 A's to come into play, the most extraordinary things can happen, the most extraordinary healing can occur, because finally our system gets to experience that thing that maybe we didn't have as children, which is so common and so much more common than we often allow ourselves to believe or to feel. That as young children, we might simply be accepted for who we are and not needed, with no demand or pressure to change ourselves in any way, to be allowed to be our fullest expression of ourselves without having our wings clipped in any way. Like, I feel drawn to just mention them again. There's attention, really giving our attention to someone, acceptance, appreciation, affection, and allowing.
Yeah. Wow. Those are good. I should have a better response than that, but just yeah, those are really, really good. And the idea of the developmental trauma being different, that hit me pretty hard too, of like, oh yeah, not about what happened, but what didn't happen. Like that. I definitely circle back to stuff that, like, you wish had happened, that you watch others have happen and you think, yeah, I wish I had gotten that. I wish I had received that as a child. And there's so much to be said about how we act in our adult relationships trying to get the love that we were trying to get as kids that we never received. And that yeah, there's a way to approach that really consciously where you, like, figure out what it is you're actually looking for,
Mhm.
figure out, like, what you are missing, and are able to ask for it in a very, you know, yeah, conscious and adult way instead of acting out in ways that try to grab it
Yeah.
and really, like, almost aggressively take it from someone instead of opening and allowing and saying, "This is what I need. Are you able to meet me here? Are you able to offer this to me?" Yeah.
That. I don't know when this podcast may be released, but in May, another book that I've been working on supporting the editing of is exactly about all of these topics. It's called Daddy, The Healing Power of Big Little Play, but it is ultimately about how we hold these younger parts of ourselves and how we can support each other in holding each other's younger parts, in being able to offer and give the things that we didn't experience when that's something that may be of interest.
Absolutely. And you know what? I think this might be coming out just at the right time for that to be newly out into the world and available for people.
Okay.
So that's perfect. Yeah, how else can people find you and come into contact with your work? And yeah,
Thank you. Um, I'm Bear Phillips pretty much everywhere. My website is Bear Phillips with two L's .co.uk. And I'm Bear Phillips on Instagram and on Facebook. And I also have a Substack, which is Bear Phillips, the Feminist Love Coach, which is where there are articles around a lot of the things we've been discussing today: pleasure, access to pleasure, kink, consent, rupture and repair, all of that good stuff. So, yeah, come find me, come say hello. Be lovely to hear from
beautiful. Thank you so much. And all those links will be available in the show notes. Go check out all of all of the amazing things that came out in today's episode, but in greater detail. Yeah, I'm excited to read some of those articles. And yeah, thank you so much. And to read your new books, of course.
you.
Those two will also be linked below. So yeah, thank you so much for your time and for all of your attention to care to this conversation. And yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Kris. It really has. I've enjoyed it so much. Appreciating you.